Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wulfhorst. We learned this week of the passing of former Governor Jodi Rell, a historic state leader and respected political giant. She died Wednesday at a Florida hospital, her family telling us she suffered from a brief illness. Her sudden death has sent shockwaves through Connecticut and D.C. The 78-year-old upholding an incredible legacy in and out of political office. She started in the State House of Representatives. She served there for a decade starting in 1985. She then was lieutenant governor on John Rowland's Republican ticket, but took over to pull the state out of massive scandal after Rowland was federally investigated and faced impeachment, eventually serving prison time. Rell was only the second woman governor in Connecticut, leading from 2004 to 2011. She described her job at the time as restoring honor to Connecticut and public faith in government. Those I spoke with say there was no one better for the task at the time and believe the country right now could use more politicians with her compassion, candor, and bipartisan spirit.
I love what she stood for, but I loved her as a human being and as a person. She did not run around as a Republican. I didn't run around as a Democrat. We ran around as friends.
She was a person who put people over politics.
Governor Rell had sort of that maternal style of governing, and I think it's why the state of Connecticut embraced her so much, and she just had such a high approval ratings in the state of Connecticut.
In a day of bombastic politicians and whoever the loudest in the room is tends to win, she was the exact opposite. She was civil, she was calm, and I think she really was a steady hand for Connecticut at an important time.
The office was marred with scandal, and she had to come in and really sort of clean it up. And she created the Citizens Election Program, a lot of election reforms, took lobbyist money and special interest money out of politics in the state of Connecticut.
Clean campaigns, expanding daycare, expanding Medicaid, always thinking about families.
She brought out the best in people. The state came ahead of party politics, which is something kind of unique in today's age. But that's what she did, and that's what all politicians should do.
She was able to be powerful but civil, and that's a really good lesson, I think, in politics.
Rell was Connecticut's last GOP governor. Her nearly 3 decades in public service here left many long-standing policies and accomplishments. We have more about those at fox61.com and on the Fox 61 News app. Of course, out of office, Rell did spend the rest of her life promoting work across the aisle and political involvement at all levels, especially through Hartford's Jodi Rell Center for Public Service. We spoke with Patti Russo, director of the campaign school at Yale, who knew former Governor Rell and knows exactly how her example has inspired women, especially in the world of government.
I had the pleasure and honor to know Governor Rell when I was with the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women. She was a big supporter of so many key pieces of legislation that impacted women and families in our state, a true fearless leader on that front. And then beyond that, when we started our school, the campaign school at Yale, she was a regular speaker.
Russo tells us beyond supporting the path Rell herself helped pave, putting more women in politics at all levels, the campaign school also takes a page from Rell's bipartisan people over party focus.
We're about civility, about fearless leadership, about doing more listening than talking and really understanding people's different perspectives, getting to know each other as people first rather than a political party.
The campaign school already saw massive turnout for their most recent workshop post-election. Many people frustrated or fired up. More than 40 women signed up after the presidential race was called, and Harris made her concession speech. But the question now becomes, can this momentum make a lasting impact? And what would it take for a woman to eventually be elected to the Oval Office?
You know, politics, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We are in it for the long haul. We made tremendous strides this last campaign cycle 2 weeks ago, down ballot. So let's celebrate all of that. Let's celebrate all the victories that we were able to achieve, not only in Connecticut, but also nationally, right? Nobody's really talking about it because we're so focused on the top of the ticket, obviously. You know, I get it. It happens every 4 years, the presidential. It's all about the presidential. But let's look at and let's really hold and celebrate all that we have been able to achieve, all the progress we have been able to make, and keep going. There's so many women who have gotten their start on the local level, right? That's where the action is. That's where you can have a big impact and it not take over your entire life, right? If you're working full time, you've got a couple of kids, at home, you're busy, right? You're busy. You want to be in the driver's seat always in your life. So how can I make a difference? What kind of impact can I make where don't have to drive myself crazy, but I could really, really make a difference in my community? That's when women think about Board of Ed, state rep, state senate, and then start thinking about other possibilities. So many of the grads, our grads from all over the country and the world, have started down ballot and have worked their way up to Congress and Senate and hopefully president someday. Not every woman was born to run, Emma, but every woman was born to lead. Find your lane. Find an area where you're going to excel and share your light with the world. So maybe I want to run for office. Let me go to the one day to figure it out. Maybe I want to run a campaign. That's what I love. I'm behind the scenes, as you know. I love telling people what to do and how to be even more fabulous than they already are. I am tough love. That's my skill set, right? Or how do I become a more effective leader in my community on an issue I feel passionately about? So there's always an opportunity to step up, raise your hand, and take the lead. What our program does is give you the skills and the community to move forward.
The campaign school holds workshops and an annual training session to give anyone the resources and momentum to become the choice they want to see on their ballot, whether it's the White House to local boards and commissions. Russo and others in the political world see representation of all different people and backgrounds in government as the solution to the record distrust and apathy we're seeing. And speaking of representation, we did get a chance to speak with Chief Lynn Malerba. She's the first female chief of the Mohegan Tribal Nation and also served as the first Native American to ever hold the office of U.S. Treasurer. After 2 years, she stepped down from that post. We spoke with her about what was accomplished and what comes next.
We really did accomplish a lot in the 2.5 years or so that I was there. I would say our proudest accomplishments, along with the Office of Tribal and Native Affairs, was setting up the Office of Tribal and Native Affairs and then working on 2 pieces of proposed regulation that are now out for tribal consultation. One would be the General Welfare Exclusion Act. That was passed in 2014. It established the Treasury Tribal Advisory Committee, which I was a part of. And that advisory committee then engages with Treasury on guidance and policy and tax policy. So this particular piece of legislation allows tribes to provide services to their tribal citizens just as another government would, and those services will not be taxable as they should be. So really, it's a very important piece of legislation, as every government does provide services for their people, so should tribal nations be allowed to do that. The other piece of guidance that was very, very important to us was the tax status of tribally chartered corporations. 30 years ago, it was codified that states could operate businesses for the purpose of governmental revenue, and that those businesses would enjoy the tax status of states, which is not taxable. Tribes have been waiting 30 years for that same consideration, because what's different about tribes is that they don't have a tax base. They don't have land that they can tax, unlike other municipalities. They tax their citizens. That's how they provide services. Tribes must operate businesses to generate governmental revenue. So as long as the businesses now are wholly owned by the tribe, it does provide certainty to tribes that the tax status of the tribe will also be the tax status of their business, which is very important because tribes operate all sorts of governmental programs, just as states do. Roads, public safety, healthcare, all of the things that other governments do, tribes are engaged in as well. But we use our economic development to provide for those services. I think the things that we've worked on will get carried forward. I think it's important that we continually educate our leaders, our governmental leaders, on what it means to be Indigenous and what that relationship is. We've worked really hard to talk about trust and treaty obligations and what that means. All of the United States was once Indian country, and it was Indian land. So we have given the United States, and sometimes it was forcibly taken, 97% of all lands in the United States, minerals rights, resources, water resources. But we considered that in exchange for healthcare, for services that would take care of our tribal people, because we knew that eventually we would be in the minorities. I also think it's important for people to understand that not every tribal nation has good economic development. And so that those tribes are more dependent on the services that are provided from the United States. You can imagine the Plains tribes don't always have good economic development. They don't have broadband services, and 20% of tribes don't have broadband. So how can you create businesses when you don't even have the basic essentials that you would need? And so it is really more about engaging deeply and being informed about how we can best serve our tribal nations. One of the things we talked about was, as we looked at the Alaska Native villages, you may have one or two people that are managing all of the funding and the grant funding who would not be able to access various programs unless we allowed tribal consortia to access those programs. No one would have thought about that until there was funding available and we were able to think about how we might serve those communities differently. And I also think it's important to understand that tribal communities are not, not a monolith, that each one has their own unique history, challenges. Sometimes it's a place-based challenge. So to really, truly have that conversation and think about how we might be more flexible with one another.
And your tribal name means many hearts,
Yes.
Something that was meaningful for you during your time as a cardiac nurse. You became the first female chief of the Mohegan Tribal Nation, and then becoming the first Native American to ever hold, the office of Treasury. We've heard from people, and I think, you've touched many hearts, and your work has throughout this process. Are there any moments or conversations that have stuck with you over these past few years?
I think the moment that stuck with me, and there were multiple moments, but I think just being able to make your personal family, your tribal family, and all of Indian country proud was really important. But I will also tell you, watching the money with my name on it roll off the press was a moment that I'll never forget, because I was raised in very humble circumstances. And, I'm a kid from Uncasville, Connecticut. And so to see my name on the money, complete with my maiden name, my parents' name on the money, just, brought me to tears because it was so unexpected and it was such an honor.
What's next for you and for Mohegan?
Well, what's next for me is less federal policy work and more cultural work at Mohegan. I've never had the time to become more proficient in my language, and we now have people who are studying our language and increasing everyone's fluency. So I hope to work on that, but I don't think in Mohegan it will be difficult for me to learn, but I'm going to give it a college try. I want to become a better beader. So I want to engage in various styles of beadwork, and I want to learn how to play pickleball. So it's time for me to really engage in those things that I haven't had the time to do, and I'm really looking forward to that.